Hey there guys, and welcome back to the channel. This is the Lower Providence Criterium in Audubon, PA, and this is the Cat 4 field. And if you look at the map, you can see it's pretty similar to NorCal like industrial park crits. Pretty square, it's simple four corners, and it's really smooth. There's almost no climbing. And this was a fast race for sure, but it was a lot of fun. I will definitely be doing this again. And I think there were about 45 to 50 starters in this field, so not super big, but decently sized. And it got going pretty quick, for sure. It was single file for a bit of this. There were already attacks going up the road. There were a lot of attempts at breakaways in this race, as you'll see coming up in this video, but none of them really stuck. It was kind of hard to make things stick on a course like this. And I was surfing wheels like I usually do, and I wanted to try to do really well in this race. I've been feeling pretty confident about my abilities over my last few races, and I figured that in this kind of field, on this kind of course, I could do pretty well. And I was not really worried about crashing, so I figured I could be a little more sendy on this one, or at least afford to be a little more sendy. So there are some decent sized teams in this event. So big ones to watch out for is the Vitesse team here, the GII Getting It In cyclist, the Bikeworks team, and the WC Dev. So each of these teams had between 3 and 5 or 3 and 6 riders. So these are the teams to watch out for, especially Vitesse. They had, I think, 5 guys in this race. So they were definitely well equipped to control this race. And if they had somebody in the breakaway, they could afford to have the rest of the group slow the peloton down and help them break away. So here is a pretty early attempt at a break. And you'll watch in this video a lot of me following breaks, or at least break attempts. And some of it was like that one I was able to get some kind of separation from the peloton. But to be honest, I think one thing that I didn't do very well was accelerate fast enough from the group to kind of cut the connection. So since I don't have a rear cam, it's really hard to explain it, or it's really hard to kind of understand what's going on behind me, obviously, but there were a lot of times where I'd try to catch up to the break, but I wouldn't do it fast enough, and I'd end up just pulling the whole group with me, so the break would pretty much just be brought back. So not exactly what I wanted to do, but I guess I was just a little worried about being in a break and burning out. So it led to me kind of like half committing to breakaways, which was just not very good strategy. But there were a lot of attacks. There were a lot of attempts at breakaways in this race. And it was cool to see, and a lot of teams were trying it. This race, I think this is the first race where I've seen a lot of tactics, and this is the first race where I've really been able to focus on like watching what other teams are doing. Just because it's not very technical, I wasn't worried about the actual course itself. This one was much more of me trying to figure out what the different teams were doing, who was feeling strong, who wanted to try to make a break up the road. And it was really cool to see. I mean, this was like the first real strategy play out for me to see, or lack thereof. I mean, there's kind of strategy, but there's kind of not. You'll see coming up that there wasn't much cohesion with the teams. And like in my previous videos, again, I'm on Evo, and I'm riding solo in this race. There are a couple other people from the DC area in this race. There's a guy named Mike who's on Kelly, who you'll see on red and silver LA Sprint. And surprisingly, he was by himself. Usually Kelly rolls up with a whole squad, but he was by himself. Yeah, he's right there. So he and I had talked before the race. I ride with him at Haynes a lot for the Haynes lunch rides. And he and I both wanted to get upgrade points in this race. So we both wanted to do well. We both wanted to stay towards the front. And we kind of became allies, more or less. There are some other one-off teams in this race, like this guy right in front of me, this Michelob Ultra Cliff team. This guy was all over the race. He was doing pretty well. He was pretty aggressive in his handling. And there were some other teams as well. There was... so there's this guy right in front of me. There's this guy in the black on that really funky looking lay, which is kind of cool. I like that. And a little bit of elbow action going on. And I spent a lot of time on the front, but I also spent some time in kind of mid-pack. But I was worried whenever breaks would go. So since I'm by myself on my team, I wanted to make sure that I was with breakaway attempts because I don't have teammates to help me out. And if there's ever a breakaway that would stick, I'd want to go with that since I don't have anyone to really help me kind of slow down the group for me if I were in a breakaway or vice versa. And if a breakaway ends up sticking in this race, like obviously I want to do well and I'd want to at least try to go for podium. So I want to make sure I'm with these breakaways, which was good practice for me to understand how to handle being in a break and trying to get separation from the peloton, kind of putting in that dig to break up the connection. But it also, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't burning too many matches either. So I wanted to make sure that I was striking a balance between going with breaks that I thought would stick, but not overcommitting. And you'll see that there are times where I'll like slowly bridge a gap to the break, which in the grand scheme of things probably just burns more matches than I needed to because it's more time in the wind. But I didn't want to put in huge sprints to try to catch these groups and burn my matches because as the race went on, I felt more and more confident that it was just going to come down to a bunch sprint. So the GII guy right now is trying to break up the road. There are these two guys in front of me, and fortunately I have enough of a rest right kind of before this Rafa guy in the white kind of put in the attack that I was able to respond pretty well. And in general in this race, fitness-wise, I was feeling really good, and I was able to respond pretty well to attacks that would happen, even if I was at the front. So right here, here's an example. So I kind of like put in a dig, but then I kind of stop. And this is, I don't really know what I was trying to do here. I don't really have a purpose for why I'm doing this. And I watch NorCal cycling a lot, and one of the things he says is, you know, if you were to ask someone like what they're doing on the front, like if they don't have an answer for you, then you shouldn't be there. And I honestly don't really have an answer for why I'm here. I'm kind of just like, I pulled through a little bit past that white Rafa guy, and then I kind of stopped. And now we're slowing down a little bit. And part of it's okay because I didn't spend too much effort trying to do a breakaway, so I can slot in pretty quickly here and keep my speed up. But it was kind of pointless, honestly, just being on the front and eating the wind. And there were a couple times where I ate wind more than I should have, and rather than sliding it behind somebody. And that's definitely a skill I'm working on, is when I am to the side of a big pace line and kind of just being more aggressive in sliding in behind somebody. That's the skill that I'm still a little wary about doing that. But so we're going to fast forward a bit now. So we're on the 15th lap, and so this Project Echelon guy is telling me right there, let's work together, short pulls. And this was actually the first real break that had any cohesion. So right now it's me and probably 5 other guys in this break, and the Project Echelon guy is more or less being the coach, telling us to take short pulls, to pull through, keep the pace up, and try to make this break stick. But already it's kind of breaking up. So these guys pull through, but there's no rotation really. I mean, this guy on the left here pulls off, and now I'm going through here, and eventually I'm going to pull through when this Rafa guy decides to stop pulling. And so it kind of fell apart, but now it's back together. Doing a short pull here, pull off here, and then the Project Echelon guy is going to come up to my right. But then after this, there's no one else to pull through. So I don't know if it was people not wanting to commit, the energy to making this work, or just not wanting to work together, or just not understanding how to work together, or a combination of all the above. But no one comes to pull through for the Project Echelon guy. He's looking over his shoulder, and there's no one there to help him. So this breakaway ends up failing, and we end up getting caught. So, and that was kind of the story of this race. There's a lot of that going on. There's a lot of hopeful attempts at breakaways, and then they all just kind of get caught. So we're coming through here. We're just starting lap 16, and keeping the speed up a little bit, but this isn't too fast. And right now, I'm still feeling pretty good. My heart rate's at 173, which for me is pretty solid. And one of the things I loved about this course was it was so wide in the turns and in the streets that I didn't actually have to touch my brakes almost ever. The only time I really had to touch my brakes was if there was a bunch going through the turn, and if someone in front of me was slowing down a little bit or kind of deviating from their line. But I could pretty much not touch my brakes at all, and I could pedal through, which made for a super efficient race. I felt really good all around. I didn't feel like I was burning up too much energy. The wind was on this street here. I believe it was a left to right crosswind, but it was kind of hard to tell because there was another street that had somewhat of a crosswind as well. But this street here and the start-finish straight were both either headwind or tailwind. I believe it was a tailwind going through the start-finish straight, which is nice, obviously. But so here we're bunching back up, and I'm kind of sitting on the front. I'm eating wind, but we're not going too fast. And my heart rate's dropped down to 162, which is nice. So I'm more or less recovering. And now there's attacks going. So this guy on this team, I remember he put in a couple attacks that looked pretty threatening. And fortunately, my heart rate was recovered enough that I could respond. So I'm able to hop on this guy's wheel. And I remember looking over my shoulder a couple times in these breakaway attempts and always kind of seeing the peloton right behind us. So even when I thought that it'd be fast enough to get separation, it just wasn't. It was just enough to get single file up at the front, but it wasn't enough to make it stick. And so now we're more or less all back together. There's enough flyer going up the right side. And now we're really bunching up. And now I'm kind of falling back. And there were a couple times in this race where I fell back almost on purpose to get back in a draft and save my energy. Because like I mentioned before, the more I realized that these brakes weren't going to stick, the more I realized that it was probably just going to come down to field sprint. And so my tactics changed. So originally it was try to hang with brakes if they were to happen. And my main goal for myself was a tactic that I had thought about before the race was if the group was still together on the last lap, trying to attack through the second to last turn and doing like basically a long sprint was what I was trying to, that was one idea that I had. So it was to like go all out into the second to last turn, get separation, and just try to stick it all the way. That's a tactic that I was going to try. But as you'll see as later, it does not shake out that way, but it's still a good thing. The race ended up pretty well for me. So now we're all back in a group. So Mike on Kelly, he's just moved up a bit, and now we're jostling for position. And I remember thinking at this point that the test rider up there on the left, like that looks threatening. They tried a lot of attacks in this race. They had a lot of guys, so they were able to throw attack after attack and still be able to recover. GII, they were up there too. And a couple others who were trying to throw attacks down. This guy in the blue jersey on the left, he was throwing attacks. And this guy right in front of me too, which is the QCW team, I believe. They were throwing attacks, so now we're kind of fanning out. And this part was a slight uphill. Very, very slight. Yeah, now I'm actually really back, or even further back than that. And sometimes, so when I would come around a turn and I would see how far away the leader of the race was, I'd get a little worried. But at this point in the race, I know that we still have a few laps to go. So I'm not super concerned. I know that I can, if I need to, put in a dig and make up spots. But now we have people moving up the left side. And there were a lot of times in this race where there'd be moves up the right or left sides of the group. And I'd be kind of stuck in the middle. And it made it hard because I would just basically just get boxed in and wouldn't really be able to move up. So whenever I had an opportunity to be on the outside of the group and move up, I definitely capitalized on that. And ideally in the protected side of the wind as well was nice. There were a couple times in this race where I did pretty well with going up, moving up the group on the protected side from the wind, which obviously saves a ton of energy and allowed me to save some of my matches for later. And the race wasn't super surgy out of the turns. I know Riverton for me was really surgy. That's probably why I burned up so much, is because I wasn't very consistent. But I mean, this race is definitely my favorite so far. As far as just smooth, consistent, good handling. Everybody here is pretty good about holding their lines. This is a pretty experienced group, from what I could tell. So I really, really enjoyed this race. But now we're coming into 2 laps to go. And it's getting pretty hectic. And there are no more breaks now. This is basically going to come down to a field sprint. So moving up here. And at this point I remember thinking, oh, I'm on the protected side from the wind, because I didn't remember where the wind was coming from. And then right now here, you see that banner in the left, that like police banner that I just passed. At that point I realized that it was not, because I just got hit with a blast of wind. And that definitely took a little bit out of my legs. But I was able to stay with the group, didn't lose too many places, but I definitely want to stay moving up. So right here, you're going to see me move up. Look at that. So many spots. I said on your left a couple times to make sure the guys knew I was there. And this was a clutch decision on my part. And it's not that I couldn't have made up the spots later, but this just prevented the headache of trying to move up in the group. And it honestly just put me in such a good position. I mean, I'm a little too far on the front now, because I mean, this is the front of the race, and I'm almost breaking my own wind. But fortunately, there were other guys who were able to move up and basically become blockers for the wind. So I'm sitting behind this GII guy. The guy in the brown kit threw in some decent attacks. He was also Riverton. He was throwing in attacks there as well. So I know that these guys are good wheels to follow. And it's pretty single file now. So I know that there are a lot of guys right behind me. I think there are guys on my left and my right trying to jockey for position. And if I'm a protected sprinter, so hypothetically, if these guys were my teammates, this would be a pretty good spot. So if I were, say, like Legion, and these 2 guys were also in Legion, and they were controlling the pace, that'd be good. That'd be a good spot for me if I were a sprinter. But obviously I'm not on their team, so it's a lot of chaos now. The guy in the brown jersey pops off. The GI guy is still there. And then we have WC Dev guy come in. 2 of them, actually. So one's right on my right, and then one's right in front of him. And I'm still feeling pretty good about this. So we're coming in with 1 lap to go. And Bigfoot guy in the orange, he moves up. And that guy on the, I think it's Cruise CX is the name of that team. The guy with the black and like red tile kit. Here's Mike. And I know Mike's got a good sprint. I've seen him ride at Haynes. I've seen him do the lunch rides. He's done really, really well. He actually rode the Thursday before this race. We did a Haynes lunch ride. He rode with a backpack on him, which was impressive, and not aero. So now we're in 1 lap to go. And I'm still feeling pretty good about this position. I definitely don't want to lose any spots now. I want to make sure that if there are any surges in this front group, I want to stay with them. And there are a lot of guys moving up on the inside now. And we're just trying to stay together. But I remember feeling really confident. I remember thinking at this point, okay, great. Like, no one's trying to go off the front early, which is something that I'd be a little worried about. I don't know if I'd have the strength to chase that down and then beat them if that were the case. So if it came down to a field sprint, I'm pretty confident in my sprint. So I'm feeling pretty good about this. And I'm able to take these turns really well. I pedaled through them, which was awesome. There's a lot of moving around. There's a lot of jostling in this last lap. And we held our lines pretty well. There was only once or twice where someone yelled at someone to hold their line, which was in the last couple of laps when everyone's getting excited, trying to fight for position. So right now there are flyers coming on the inside. Yep. Yeah, we get a little dicey there. Someone right there falls, goes wide, and rubs the curb and falls into the grass. Fortunately, they're okay. They landed in the grass. And now I'm just trying to catch this group. So the crash didn't really inconvenience me. I didn't lose any spots, really. And this is pretty good position. I would ideally be one or two more wheels up because I know that as soon as we make this turn and get straight, it's all out. And I was just gone. Like, I dumped all the watts here, everything I had left in my legs. I left everything out there. And I managed to catch this guy on the Rafa kit. Guy on the far right makes it second, and I grabbed third. And that was a great race. And I loved that course. We'll definitely be doing it again. There's another one actually on September 11th. They added a second date. And I'm tempted to do that one, although I'm also signed up for the Bucks County Criterium on the 12th. So might turn that into a doubleheader race weekend. Who knows? Maybe, maybe not. But for now, I'm actually off racing for about a month. So my next race is going to be the Argyle Time Trial on the 31st of July. And that's in West Virginia. That's hosted by Otter House. So I am taking a break from racing for a little bit. But I think that's okay. I'll be in Puerto Rico with my girlfriend for a few weeks, and we'll bring the bikes. So we'll still be doing training. But I had a great race, and I want to thank you guys again for watching. Thanks for my family and my friends for supporting me, and especially my girlfriend, Mayrav, for driving me and bringing me stuff, and I'll catch you guys at the next one.
All right, so we've got some of our young juniors.